This is the Biz News Podcast, one-on-one conversations with experts in business and personal development.
Psychologist and Florida International University professor Tom Norris says an answer to the divisiveness that's rupturing society can be as simple and as difficult as a cup of tolerance. That's also the title of his recent book. Tom Norris joins us for A Cup of Tolerance in this edition of Bizgnus Interviews. First, as we get underway, Tom, would you set the table for our viewers and listeners by telling them a little bit about yourself and your background?
Basically, I've been a counselor for 53 years now as a social worker, psychotherapist, and now a spiritual counselor. Okay, and I run my own practice. I have 4 staff, and we literally see people around the world. It's pretty fascinating work. I love it.
And you do this primarily via Zoom, I suspect.
Yes, by Zoom, WhatsApp, and FaceTime, basically, yes.
All right.
I also have authored 2 books. One is called A Fresh Cup of Tolerance, about the theology of universalism, the new religion of tolerance. And the second one is a handbook of spiritual counseling called A Fresh Cup of Counseling.
Well, we'd like to talk about that
And
word.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Tom. We'd like to talk about tolerance.
Yes.
I'm surprised you can even find a cup of it any place.
Well, that's part of the frustration, isn't it? I don't know about you, but I'm getting awfully sick and tired of our culture wars and tribalism, which has been building for a while. We have a long history of that in the United States, but somehow it seems to be a little worse lately. And I find it very...
Why do you suppose it seems to be getting worse? Because I think you'd find an awful lot of people agreeing with that.
Well, I think that for some strange reason, we have come to a place where over Thanksgiving dinner, the person we're debating is no longer a patriot and an American, but now they're an enemy. And before it used to be we just disagreed. And so in that respect. And I have no explanations for it other than some of the cycles of humanity that we go through from liberal to conservative, and it just kind of goes back and forth over history, you know.
As societies swung from one end to the other in years past, we were talking about a society perhaps that didn't move much faster than the speed of a locomotive, if that, perhaps even just a horse. But
Right.
now it's instantaneous.
That's right. I mean, you know, you never learned about a little war in Africa 150 years ago, and today, like that. And we might say, oh my God, the world is going to a hell in a handbasket. But interestingly, sociologists tell us that this time of history, we have less poverty and more prosperity and less war and more peace than we've ever had in human history as long as it's been written. And the only reason we don't think that is because everything's instant now.
If you watch the 6 o'clock news any given night, you would say he's completely wrong. He can't possibly be right. But are you? How does that figure into your cup of tolerance?
Well, I guess I take a long view of things, and I realize that, okay, if the pendulum is swung over here, eventually most people, most Muslims interest in putting on a suicide belt. Most Christians have no interest in judging someone else as whatever. It's the people on the extremes that tend to be well, they've done media things. For example, they found out that 57% of the Muslims that are interviewed on TV are radical. Percent of them are radical. So, you know, in like every magazine, if it bleeds, it leads. Same thing happened. I'm a 60s kid. I was an anti-war protester and a civil rights protester back in the 60s, and the same thing happened. They would, I remember protest in Washington, a wonderful peace march, November 1969. After everybody left, about 1,000 people were left behind. There must have been 100,000, 200,000 people there. People were left, and they rioted. The next day, what got the headlines? These people that nobody was there that had been at the peace march. So I think that sometimes we unfortunately pay too much attention to the radicals and to the noisy people. Most of
How,
us who are moderate, we don't need to go out and tell them, hey, I'm a moderate. It's just not our style.
one of the things that we've been struck with, Pew, I believe, was the source of this, uh, is the decline in mainline religion in terms of a number of people who say they are Christian in the United States, for example, or who attend church regularly, and that was defined
Right.
as virtually just showing up once a year.
Yeah.
What's going on, and where's the future?
Well, this has been the trend in the institutional religions, particularly Christianity, since the 60s. They've probably lost over half of their or more of their population now. What I find is in my universalist churchy church, you can imagine, we really don't have many rules or rituals, but we have an expression that is we're not very religious, but we're very spiritual. So you find that many people today still have a faith. They believe in there's a God or something, a higher power, and they believe in that. They just don't find that the are very relevant anymore, particularly my students.
So this is a young people's thing then.
Oh, well, not just young, that's the old people now too, but yeah, definitely young. If I have a class of 35 students and I ask them, how many of you attend church regularly? 5 will say yes. That's it. About a third will tell me they're atheists, knowledge that maybe they're not. Some of them are actually agnostic. They don't understand the two terms until we break it down. No, I'm an agnostic. There's something out there, I know. I just don't choose to define it. I just know that it has some importance in my life, and there's a day where I'm really in the flow, and there's days when I'm not. So, and so for many young people, emphasis on you're a sinner and on the missing the message of Jesus, which was so focused in the church now on the death and resurrection and not his message. It's left a lot of people cold.
Dom, how would you go about increasing the number of people drinking from a cup of tolerance? Would you set up a couple of coffee wagons here and there, or what?
Okay, I missed one word there. Drinking from a what?
A
That
cup of tolerance, and thank you
oh,
very much, Zoom.
right. Um, by listening to each other and not judging. Um, I'm a person in my personal practice as a spiritual universalist. I do believe in reincarnation. Many Christians throughout history did too. It's only recently that that's been considered that Asian stuff. But I look back and say, well, in some lifetime, why am I judging that person when I probably was like that? And then maybe I was a dictator, maybe I was a bad husband, maybe I was and it helps you kind of get a perspective of not judging so much and just working on trying to listen to each other, respect each other. Now that takes two people. If the other side's not willing to, that makes it more difficult. I don't have many answers for that. I don't think any of us do yet. There's about a substantial third of our population very set in their beliefs, and they have a difficult time hearing anything else. There's a big echo chamber in what they listen to and talk to all the time, and they don't really they're not open to debate or discussion, sadly.
A lot of that may also include our political leaders. You're
Oh, yeah,
recently
unfortunately, yes.
Well, you're recently from
Mhm.
Florida and still have association with higher education in this state. Have you been watching what the governor has been doing with any interest?
Uh, yes, a lot. And all of us who are in academia are really distressed by what's happening because this feels very much like the threat to free speech, and the academic feels very much like what other countries do, because there are things I was told I can no longer teach in class. And if I do, then I can be fired or even criminally charged. And that could be anything like discussing the history of slavery or the history of genocide against Native Americans and so on and so forth, which are historically relevant pieces to all understand, not just the good things in our society, but the ugly things too. We've been a balance like any civilization.
Uh, Tom, I know our viewers and listeners who are putting up with a lot of cutting in and out of the signal from where you're at. Let's let them know where they can get more information about you. I presume you probably have a website.
Well, you can get me on Amazon Author. I'm there. And I have a website. It's called www.com.
You've been watching the Biz News Podcast. We welcome your input. Send your email to editor@biznews.com. Thanks for watching.